For lead accompaniment, most musicians become familiar with two main scale forms, 7-tone or heptatonic, and 5-tone or pentatonic. But we can also use 6-tone or hexatonic patterns as a roadmap for introducing new phrasing ideas and quickly linking up different areas of the neck. Hexatonic scales can be thought of as adding a tone to a pentatonic scale or omitting a tone from a 7-tone scale. But as we'll see, it's the repeating patterns they form on the neck that makes them so accessible and versatile for playing quick, sequential runs and forming new phrasing ideas. First, we need to be aware of how these hexatonic patterns are positioned on the neck in relation to the key in which we're playing. Let's begin in C major. Here I've mapped out the 7-tone C major scale. This will cover all the natural chords that may occur in a C major key progression, or its relative A minor key, plus all the modes of C major. More on that later. Now we're going to break up this core pattern into 5 hexatonic patterns, each one 3 notes per string, all within close proximity to one another. As you can see, each pattern has a repeating sequence of 6 tones, divided into 3 string pairings. We just have to move up the neck for this last one. Our first pattern can be seen as formed around 3 root positions. Descending, we'd form the first string pairing sequence around the C note on the first string, 8th fret. Notice how our index finger is positioned on this root. This sequence then gets repeated on our next string pairing, using the same fingering. Again, our index finger is positioned on the C root, this time on the 3rd string. And a final repetition on our lowest string pairing. We can visualize this pairing as formed around the C note on the 5th string, 3rd fret. So we could use this as a reference position for ascending the pattern. Practice moving up and down the full pattern. For these wider patterns, ensure your thumb is positioned at the center of the back of the neck for maximum reach. Shortly, we'll look at different ways we can navigate and break up this pattern. For now, we're just learning the roadmap. Our next hexatonic pattern can be formed 2 frets up from the previous root, with a slightly different fingering sequence. But again, this sequence gets repeated across the same 3 string pairings. Again, be aware of the root positions within this pattern. Onto our third pattern, another repeating sequence across the 3 string pairings. Once again, become aware of the root positions as references for starting in this pattern. Fourth pattern. As the top part of the pattern is higher up the neck and the fret space is narrower, we can use our 3rd instead of 4th finger if preferred. And finally, the 5th pattern. We just have to move up the neck slightly to accommodate this one. This is the odd one out because we alternate the fingering sequence within each string pairing. Notice how the root position for this pattern is the same as our first pattern. This is easier to see with the 5th pattern an octave lower. So this final pattern can be seen as linking up to the first. Not only are these 5 patterns convenient because of their repeating fingering sequence, they're also versatile because, like the 7-tone major scale, they'll work over all the natural chords in the major and relative minor keys. That's C major and A minor in this case. For example, if our C major key progression moved to the 4 chord, F major, these patterns would give us the natural colour tones of that chord, without having to change from the tonic position of C. This would be the equivalent of a Lydian flavor. Playing them over D minor, the 2 chord, will give us a Dorian flavor. And the relative A minor tonic and key can also be covered by our C major patterns. On the lesson page, you can find diagrams showing you how these patterns would be positioned in several keys. Once we've memorized the patterns, we can start to navigate them in more interesting and dynamic ways. For example, instead of playing a linear ascending or descending run, we can add in more repetition to each string pairing. Some examples. As well as sequential runs, we can also phrase around these patterns in a more open and improvised way, incorporating techniques such as sliding and string bending. There's also the option of combining and interchanging between patterns in the same sequence. This has the effect of prolonging our scale runs and also mixing up different tone combinations. For example, we could interchange between our second and third pattern in the following way. An even more prolonged connection of these patterns. So although we're still effectively using these hexatonic sequences, moving fluidly between them is just one way of navigating and expressing the parent 7-tone scale. And we don't always have to play across the entire pattern from high to low or vice versa. Try isolating a string pairing and creating repeating sequences around just those strings. Moving to a second string pairing. We can of course apply the same hexatonic concept to other scales such as harmonic minor and melodic minor. More on that another time. For more help with this concept, including diagrams, visit the lesson page linked in the description. Please also don't forget to like and share this video if it's helped. Cheers.